The whistle of the westbound train pierced the calm afternoon as it pulled into the station at Hawthorne, Wyoming Territory, in the spring of 1875. Sophia Valente clutched her worn leather valise with white knuckles, her heart hammering against her ribs as she descended onto the wooden platform. The journey from Boston had been long and arduous, but the real challenge lay ahead, meeting the man she had agreed to marry through nothing more than a series of exchanged letters. Dust swirled around her ankles, coating the hem of her best blue traveling dress. She adjusted her bonnet to shield her eyes from the harsh western sun, searching the faces of those gathered at the station. Her breath caught in her throat when she spotted a tall figure leaning against a post, his eyes scanning the disembarking passengers. Lucas Garrison straightened as he caught sight of her. He removed his worn Stetson, revealing sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the edges. His face was tanned from years under the open sky, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested both smiles and squinting into the horizon. She recognized him immediately from the small daguerreotype he had sent months ago. As she approached, Lucas noticed her delicate hands trembling and the unmistakable look of fear in her deep brown eyes. He had seen that look before in spooked horses and in men facing down the barrel of a gun, but seeing it in the eyes of the woman who was to be his wife sent an unexpected pang through his chest. "Miss Valente?" he asked, his voice softer than she had imagined it would be. Sophia nodded, unable to find her voice at first. "Mr. Garrison," she finally managed, extending her hand formally. Instead of shaking it, he took it gently, as if it might break. "Welcome to Hawthorne. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." "It was." "Educational," she replied, still unable to meet his gaze directly. Lucas noticed how her eyes darted around, taking in the dusty Main Street, the wooden buildings, the men in worn clothing who stared at her fine Eastern dress. He saw the moment when her shoulders tensed as a group of cowboys burst into laughter outside the saloon across the street. "My wagon's just over here," he said, gesturing to a well-maintained buckboard hitched to two sturdy horses. "It's about an hour's ride to the ranch." As he loaded her trunk and helped her climb onto the seat, Lucas couldn't ignore the way she flinched when his hand accidentally brushed against her shoulder. The letters they had exchanged over 6 months had been warm, intelligent, even hinting at affection. This frightened woman seemed nothing like the spirited correspondent who had written of her dreams for a new life in the West. They rode in silence for several minutes before Lucas cleared his throat. "You seem afraid, Miss Valente." Sophia startled at his directness, then smoothed her skirt nervously. I simply don't know what to expect from Wyoming, or from me," Lucas asked, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. "Both, I suppose," she admitted. Lucas guided the horses around a bend in the road, revealing a sweeping vista of golden grassland stretching toward distant mountains. "This land can be harsh, but it's also beautiful beyond words. As for me," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I meant what I wrote in my letters. I'm looking for a partner, not a servant. I won't lie, ranch life is hard work, but I promise you'll always be respected in my home." Sophia nodded but kept her gaze fixed on her folded hands. Lucas noticed a small scar across her right knuckle and wondered about its story. After another mile of tense silence, Lucas pulled the wagon to a stop beside a clear stream. "The horses could use a drink," he explained, though it wasn't strictly necessary. He helped her down, noting again how she tensed at his touch. When her feet touched the ground, he stepped back to give her space. "Miss Valente Sophia," he said, using her first name for the first time. "I can see the fear in your eyes. I want you to know that fear has no place in our home. Whatever you're running from, whatever you're afraid of, it ends here." Sophia's head snapped up, her eyes meeting his directly for the first time. How did you? I've spent my life reading people and animals. It's how you survive out here. Lucas gestured to the land around them. I don't need to know your reasons for coming west as a mail-order bride. Your past is your own, but I want you to understand something. The woman I marry will be my equal, my partner, not someone who cowers when I raise my hand to adjust my hat. Color flooded Sophia's cheeks and she looked away. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was so transparent. Don't apologize for being cautious. It's smart. But I'd like us to start with honesty, at least about the present, if not the past. Lucas leaned against the wagon wheel. We don't have to marry right away. The preacher only comes through town once a month anyway. You can stay in the guest room, get to know me, get to know the ranch. If after a month you want to leave, I'll pay your way to wherever you want to go. Sophia's eyes widened with surprise. You would do that? After paying for my journey here, Lucas nodded. I want a wife, not a prisoner. For the first time since stepping off the train, Sophia felt something loosen in her chest. That's very fair of you, not fair, just decent. Lucas straightened up. Now shall we continue, Mrs. Patterson, my housekeeper, has probably prepared enough food to feed the entire territory, and she'll have my hide if we're late. The ghost of a smile touched Sophia's lips. We wouldn't want that. As they continued their journey, the landscape opened up before them. Sophia's eyes widened at the vastness of it all, the endless sky, the rolling prairie, the distant mountains painted in shades of blue and purple. It's beautiful, she breathed. Lucas glanced at her, noting the wonder that had temporarily replaced the fear in her expression. It is. Especially in spring when everything's green and the wildflowers bloom. You should see it after a rain when the whole world smells clean and new. I've never seen so much space, Sophia admitted. In Boston, there are buildings everywhere, people everywhere. You can hardly see the sky sometimes. Is that where you're from, Boston? Sophia hesitated. Yes, well, near Boston. She turned to him with sudden curiosity. And you, have you always been in Wyoming? Lucas shook his head. Born in Pennsylvania, came west after the war. Worked as a ranch hand until I saved enough to buy my own place 7 years ago. The war, Sophia echoed softly. Did you fight, Union cavalry? Lucas's voice took on a distant quality. 3 years of my life, don't remember much of it fondly except the horses. They kept me sane. Sophia studied his profile, seeing the lines of old pain etched there. I'm sorry, that must have been terrible. Lucas seemed surprised by her genuine sympathy. It was, but it's over now. Out here a man can start fresh. Is that why you came west, to start fresh? Partly, Lucas admitted. Partly because I fell in love with this country when we pursued deserters through it. The freedom of it, the honesty of it. He glanced at her. Is that why you came? To start fresh? Sophia's fingers automatically went to her left wrist, where a faint ring of scarred skin circled like a bracelet. She quickly adjusted her sleeve to cover it. Yes, something like that. Lucas noticed the gesture but didn't comment on it. Instead, he pointed ahead to where the land rose slightly. We're almost there, just over that rise. As they crested the small hill, Sophia gasped. Below them stretched a verdant valley, cradled by gentle slopes. A creek meandered through it, and nestled beside the water was a large 2-story house built of golden pine logs. It wasn't the rough cabin she had imagined, but a proper home with glass windows and a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Several outbuildings, a barn and corrals completed the picture. In the nearest pasture, horses grazed contentedly. That's your ranch. Sophia couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Lucas chuckled. Were you expecting something more primitive? Well, yes, she admitted. The Eastern papers make it sound as though people out west live in sod houses or crude shacks. Some do, Lucas acknowledged. I did myself for the first year while I built the house, but I always planned for something permanent, something worth passing down someday. He clicked to the horses, urging them down the slope toward home. I call it Meadowlark Ranch. As they approached, Sophia could see flower beds bordering the front of the house and curtains in the windows. It looked so civilized, so much more than she had dared to hope for. A plump older woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite the practicality of her clothing, there was something dignified about her bearing. "That's Mrs. Patterson," Lucas explained. "She's been with me since I built the house. Her husband was killed at Antietam. She cooks, keeps house, and tells me when I'm being a fool, which is often enough." His smile held genuine affection. The wagon rolled to a stop, and Mrs. Patterson approached, her keen eyes taking in every detail of Sophia's appearance. "So you're the young lady who's been exchanging letters with our Mr. Garrison," she said, her voice warm but assessing. "I'm Ruth Patterson. Welcome to Meadowlark." "Thank you," Sophia replied, suddenly self-conscious about her travel-worn appearance. "I'm Sophia Valente." "Well, Miss Valente, you look dead on your feet. Come inside and I'll show you to your room. You can wash up before supper." Mrs. Patterson shot Lucas a look. "You can bring in her things, Mr. Garrison, and don't forget to wash your hands properly this time." Lucas touched his hat brim with a grin. "Yes, madam." Sophia followed Mrs. Patterson into the house, marveling at the interior. The main room was spacious, with polished wooden floors partially covered by woven rugs. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by bookshelves that, to her surprise, were filled with actual books. The furniture was solid and well-made, not fancy by Eastern standards, but comfortable and practical. "This is lovely," Sophia said honestly. Mrs. Patterson nodded with approval. "Mr. Garrison built most of it himself. He's good with his hands. The bookshelves, especially those, are his pride. Reads everything he can get his hands on during the winter months." She led Sophia up a staircase to a hallway with several doors. Opening one, she revealed a pleasant bedroom with a large window overlooking the creek and mountains beyond. A bed with a colorful quilt, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand, and a small writing desk comprised the furnishings. "This will be your room for now," Mrs. Patterson explained. "Mr. Garrison told me about your arrangement. I think it's sensible." She fixed Sophia with a direct gaze. "He's a good man, Miss Valente, one of the best I've known. Whatever you're afraid of, and I can see plain as day that you're afraid it isn't him you should fear." Sophia's cheeks flushed. "I don't mean to seem ungrateful. Gratitude has nothing to do with it. Caution is a woman's right when dealing with unknown men." Mrs. Patterson placed fresh towels on the washstand. "I've worked for Mr. Garrison for 5 years. In that time, I've never seen him raise his voice in anger, let alone his hand. He works his men hard but fair, treats his animals with respect, and has more patience than any man has a right to." She paused. "Whatever you're running from, you've found a safe harbor here. That much I can promise you." The older woman's assessment aligned so perfectly with Lucas's own words that Sophia felt something tight inside her chest loosen further. "Thank you for telling me that," she said softly. Mrs. Patterson nodded briskly. "I'll send up some hot water. Supper's in an hour." "Nothing fancy tonight, just roast beef, potatoes, and apple pie." After she left, Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's journey and revelations. The room was bright and airy, with lace curtains that stirred in the gentle breeze from the partially open window. From somewhere outside came the distant lowing of cattle and the rhythmic sound of an axe splitting wood. True to her word, Mrs. Patterson sent up hot water, delivered by a young man who introduced himself as Tommy, the ranch hand who helped with odd jobs. Sophia washed away the travel dust, changed into a fresh dress of forest green wool, and carefully brushed and repinned her dark hair. As she moved about the room, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and paused. The face that looked back at her seemed different, somehow still her own, but with a quality she couldn't quite name. Something between wariness and hope. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Miss Valente," Lucas's voice came through the wood. "Supper's ready whenever you are." "I'll be right down," she called back, smoothing her skirt nervously. Downstairs, she found the table set with what looked like Mrs. Patterson's best dishes. Lucas stood when she entered, and Sophia was struck again by his height and the breadth of his shoulders. In Boston, such a physique might have intimidated her, but here, where everything was outsized, he seemed to fit the landscape. "You look refreshed," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "Thank you. I feel much better after washing off the train soot." Sophia sat carefully, arranging her skirts. Mrs. Patterson brought out the food, and Sophia was surprised at the quality of the meal. The roast was perfectly cooked, the potatoes seasoned well, and fresh bread completed the setting. "This is wonderful, Mrs. Patterson," Sophia said after her first bite. "Mr. Garrison makes sure we get good supplies," the housekeeper replied, pouring water into their glasses. "And I keep a kitchen garden in summer. It'll be planting time soon, perhaps you'll want to help with that." Sophia brightened. "I'd like that very much. I had a small herb garden in where I lived before." Lucas noted her hesitation but focused on keeping the conversation easy. "Mrs. Patterson grows the best tomatoes in the territory. Won a ribbon at the county fair last summer." "It was the soil amendment," Mrs. Patterson said modestly. "Horse manure and coffee grounds make all the difference." The meal continued pleasantly, with talk of the ranch, the coming spring work, and the town of Hawthorne. Sophia learned that the nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, that the town had a small school, a church that shared its minister with 2 other settlements, and that Lucas served as an informal veterinarian for the area, having learned animal doctoring during his cavalry days. After Mrs. Patterson served apple pie and coffee, she excused herself to her own quarters in a small attached wing of the house. "Would you like to see the rest of the house?" Lucas offered once they had finished. "There's still enough light." Sophia nodded, curious about her new surroundings. Lucas showed her through the downstairs rooms, a study lined with more bookshelves, a rarely used formal parlor, and a back mudroom where boots and outdoor gear were stored. "The house seems very large for just you and Mrs. Patterson," Sophia observed. "I built it with the future in mind," Lucas said, a hint of color touching his cheekbones. "Hoping for a family someday." The simple honesty of his statement touched Sophia. "It's a beautiful home. Would you like to see the barn, meet the horses, or are you too tired from your journey?" Sophia considered. The idea of retiring to her room, safe and alone, was tempting, but curiosity won out. "I'd like to see the horses if it's not too much trouble." Lucas's face lit up. "No trouble at all." Outside, the evening air was cooling but still pleasant. The setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and amber. Lucas led her to the large barn, its doors standing open to the pleasant spring air. Inside, the scent of hay and horses created an atmosphere that was surprisingly comforting. Several horses occupied the stalls, sticking their heads out curiously as they entered. "This is Duke," Lucas said, stroking the nose of a large chestnut gelding. "My main working horse, steady as they come." He moved down the row, introducing each animal. "And this is Penny," he said, stopping before a pretty bay mare who whickered softly. "She's gentle enough for anyone to ride. I thought, well, I hoped you might like to learn to ride her once you're settled." Sophia reached out hesitantly to touch the mare's velvety nose. "I've never ridden before. In Boston, I only ever rode in carriages." "She'd be patient with you. Horses can sense fear, but they respect courage more." Lucas glanced at her. "Same as people, I suppose." Their eyes met briefly, and Sophia felt a flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest. She turned her attention back to the mare, stroking her neck. "I'd like to learn," she said quietly. A comfortable silence fell between them as Sophia continued petting the horse. Finally, Lucas spoke again. "It's getting dark. We should head back to the house." As they walked back, stars began appearing in the vast Wyoming sky. Sophia had never seen so many, like diamonds scattered across dark velvet. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tilting her head back to take it all in. "One of the things I love most about this place," Lucas agreed. The stars seem close enough to touch sometimes. At the house, Lucas lit a lamp in the main room. "Would you like some tea before you retire? Mrs. Patterson always leaves the kettle ready." "That would be nice, thank you." While Lucas prepared the tea, Sophia examined the bookshelves more closely. They contained an eclectic collection of historical works, poetry, novels, and practical manuals on everything from animal husbandry to carpentry. "You have quite a library," she remarked, running her finger along the spines. Lucas brought 2 cups of tea to the small table near the window. "Reading gets me through the winter. The snow can keep us housebound for days sometimes." "Do you have a favorite?" Sophia asked, accepting the tea gratefully. Lucas considered. "Whitman, perhaps. Leaves of Grass." "There's something about his words that captures the spirit of this country." He smiled slightly. "What about you? What do you enjoy reading?" "I love the Brontes," Sophia admitted, "and Dickens, though I've read almost anything I could get my hands on over the years." "Including mail-order bride advertisements?" Lucas asked, his tone gentle rather than mocking. Sophia's fingers tightened around her teacup. "Yes, including those." Lucas seemed to sense her tension. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." "No, it's a fair question." Sophia took a deep breath. "I should explain something, Mr. Garrison." "Lucas, please." "Lucas." His name felt strange on her tongue. I haven't been entirely forthcoming in my letters." He waited, his expression open and patient. "I told you I was a seamstress in Boston, which is true, but I wasn't. I didn't have a normal life there." Sophia stared into her tea. "The truth is, I was desperate to leave. The advertisement in the newspaper seemed like providence." "Were you in some kind of trouble?" Lucas asked quietly. Sophia's hand went automatically to her wrist again. "You could say that." Lucas noticed the gesture but still didn't comment on it. "You don't have to tell me everything tonight, Sophia, or ever if you don't want to. Your past is your own. But you have a right to know who you're considering marrying," she insisted. "I know enough for now. I know you're intelligent from your letters. I know you're brave, coming all this way alone. I know you've been hurt somehow." His voice remained steady. "The rest can wait until you're ready to share it." Sophia looked at him with wonder. "You're not what I expected. Is that good or bad?" A hint of a smile played at his lips. "Good," she said softly. "Definitely good." That night, as Sophia lay in her new bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Wyoming night, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, the tentative stirring of hope. Fear was still there, lurking in the shadows of her mind, but it no longer consumed her completely. Outside her window, an owl hooted softly. The creek murmured its endless song, and somewhere in this vast, wild land, perhaps there really was a fresh start waiting for her. The next morning, Sophia woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the unfamiliar sound of roosters crowing. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back, and she sat up, taking in her new surroundings in the clear light of day. She dressed quickly in a practical brown skirt and cream-colored shirtwaist, pinned her hair in a simple style, and made her way downstairs. The house was quiet, but she could smell coffee and hear movement in the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson looked up from the stove as she entered. "Good morning, Miss Valente. I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," Sophia replied truthfully. The bed had been surprisingly comfortable, and exhaustion from travel had done the rest. "Mr. Garrison has been up since before dawn," Mrs. Patterson explained, placing a cup of coffee and a plate of eggs and bacon before Sophia. "Spring is a busy time on a ranch. Calving season just finished, and there's fence mending, preparations for branding, and 100 other tasks." Sophia felt a twinge of guilt. "Should I be helping with something?" Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "There's plenty of time for that. Mr. Garrison suggested you take today to rest and get your bearings. Tomorrow's soon enough to find your place here." After breakfast, Sophia unpacked her trunk, arranging her modest collection of clothing in the dresser and placing her few personal items around the room: a small silver hairbrush that had belonged to her mother, a book of poetry, and a tiny porcelain figurine of a bird. Around midday, a knock at the front door drew her downstairs. Mrs. Patterson was greeting a tall, angular woman with graying red hair tucked beneath a practical bonnet. "Miss Valente, this is Mrs. Grace Harper, our closest neighbor. She's come to welcome you to the area." "How do you do?" Sophia said, extending her hand politely. Mrs. Harper clasped it warmly. "Very well, thank you, dear. When Lucas mentioned he was expecting a bride, I told him I'd be by to introduce myself as soon as you arrived. Can't have you thinking the only woman in Wyoming is Mrs. Patterson, excellent though she is." There was something immediately likable about Mrs. Harper's forthright manner. She accepted Mrs. Patterson's offer of tea and settled herself at the kitchen table. "My ranch is just over the East Ridge," she explained. "My husband Thomas and I came out here 15 years ago. He passed on 3 years back pneumonia, but I've kept the place running with the help of my son and a couple of hands." "You run a ranch by yourself?" Sophia couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Mrs. Harper smiled. "Not what you expected. There are more women making their way in this territory than the Eastern papers would have you believe. We don't all need rescuing by men, though they have their uses." Her eyes twinkled. "Speaking of men, Lucas Garrison is one of the good ones. Known him since he first came to these parts. A decent, honorable man, which is rarer than gold out here." "Everyone speaks so highly of him," Sophia murmured, "because he deserves it." Mrs. Harper studied her over the rim of her teacup. "You seem surprised by that." Sophia flushed. I suppose I am. My experience with men has not always been positive." Understanding dawned in Mrs. Harper's eyes. "Ah, well, Lucas isn't like most men. Too quiet for his own good sometimes, but solid as the mountains. If he's made you a promise, he'll keep it." They chatted for nearly an hour, with Mrs. Harper filling Sophia in on the small community. There were about 20 families scattered across the nearby valleys and ridges, plus the town of Hawthorne itself, which boasted some 300 souls when the cattle drives weren't passing through. Mrs. Harper extended an invitation to Sunday dinner the following week, assuring Sophia she'd enjoy meeting the other women in the area. After Mrs. Harper left, Sophia found herself restless. The day was bright and pleasant, and she longed to explore her new surroundings. Mrs. Patterson was busy with baking, so Sophia slipped outside, intending just to walk around the immediate yard. The ranch was even more impressive in daylight. The main house sat in a natural clearing, with the barn and other outbuildings arranged in a practical semicircle nearby. Beyond them stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed, and further still, the open range rolled toward distant mountains. The creek she had glimpsed from her window curled around the western edge of the property, lined with cottonwoods and willows just beginning to leaf out. Sophia followed a well-worn path toward the creek, breathing deeply of the clean air. It smelled of grass, earth, and water so different from the close, smoky atmosphere of Boston. She reached the bank and found a flat rock perfect for sitting, removed her shoes and stockings, and dipped her feet into the cool water. The sensation was so refreshing that she laughed aloud, startling a nearby water bird into flight. For the first time in months, perhaps years, Sophia felt something like joy bubbling up inside her. She was so absorbed in the moment that she didn't hear footsteps approaching until a deep voice spoke behind her. "I see you found my thinking spot." Sophia jumped, nearly slipping off the rock in surprise. Lucas stepped forward quickly, catching her arm to steady her. "I'm sorry," he said, releasing her as soon as she was balanced. "I didn't mean to startle you." "No, I'm sorry," Sophia replied, embarrassed. "I shouldn't have wandered off without saying anything." Lucas settled on a neighboring rock, leaving plenty of space between them. "You're not a prisoner, Sophia. You're free to explore as you like. I just meant that this particular spot is one of my favorites. I come here when I need to think through a problem or just enjoy a moment of quiet." Sophia glanced at him. He had removed his hat, and his hair was damp with sweat from his morning's work. There was a smudge of dirt on his jaw, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to reveal muscular forearms tanned by the sun. Despite his imposing size, there was something gentle about his presence. "It's beautiful here," she said. "I've never seen any place like it." "It grows on you," Lucas agreed, looking out over the water. "Even more beautiful in summer when the wildflowers bloom along the banks." He glanced at her bare feet in the water, creek still cold from the mountain snowmelt. "It feels wonderful," Sophia admitted. "In Boston, I never." That is, it wasn't proper to. "To enjoy yourself," Lucas suggested with a smile. Sophia blushed. "Something like that." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, listening to the water and the occasional call of birds. "Mrs. Harper came by," Sophia finally said. "She seems very nice." Lucas nodded. "Grace is good people. Tough as nails when she needs to be, but kind-hearted. Her husband was a friend. When he died, I helped out at her place until she got her footing again." "She said you were honorable," Sophia said, then immediately wished she could take back the words. They sounded too personal, too revealing, but Lucas only nodded thoughtfully. "That's about the highest compliment Grace gives. I'm honored she thinks so." He picked up a small stone and skipped it across the water. "What else did she tell you?" "That there's a community here, other women. I hadn't expected that. Did you think you'd be the only woman for 100 miles? There was gentle teasing in his voice. "The newspapers make it sound that way," Sophia admitted. "They paint the West as nothing but lawless men, hostile Indians, and endless danger." Lucas chuckled. "There's some truth in that, but not the whole truth. Hawthorne's civilized enough. We have families, a school. People looking to build something lasting." He skipped another stone. "That said, it is a harder life than back east. Winters can be brutal. Summer brings its own challenges, droughts some years, floods others. You have to be resilient to make it here. And you think I'm not?" Sophia couldn't keep a hint of defensiveness from her voice. Lucas turned to look at her directly, his gaze assessing but not unkind. "I think you're stronger than you know, but it's only fair you understand what you're getting into." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Sophia felt a strange fluttering in her chest. She looked away first, back to the creek and her feet making small ripples in the clear water. "I should get back to work," Lucas said, standing. "Will you be all right finding your way back to the house?" Sophia nodded. "It's not far, I'll be fine." As Lucas turned to go, she called after him impulsively. "Lucas," he paused, looking back at her. "Thank you for giving me time, for not demanding explanations." His expression softened. "Everyone deserves a chance to start fresh, Sophia. Take all the time you need." As she watched him walk away, Sophia felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but beside it now grew something new, a cautious trust, a fragile hope that perhaps her gamble in coming west wasn't a mistake after all. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Sophia woke early, helping Mrs. Patterson with breakfast and learning the routines of ranch life. The older woman proved to be a patient teacher, showing Sophia how to manage the wood stove, preserve early spring vegetables, and bake the crusty sourdough bread that Lucas favored. Lucas himself was often gone from sunrise to sunset, returning tired but satisfied with the day's work. At dinner, he would share stories of calves rescued from mud bogs or fences repaired along the far boundaries of his land. Sometimes, he brought home wildflowers he had spotted while riding delicate blue forget-me-nots or bright yellow arnica, and presented them to Sophia with an almost boyish shyness. On the fourth day, Sophia asked if she could help more directly with the ranch work. Mrs. Patterson exchanged a knowing glance with Lucas. "I was wondering when you'd ask," the housekeeper said. "Most Eastern ladies I've known would be content to stay in the house indefinitely." "I'm not most Eastern ladies," Sophia replied, then worried she'd sounded too bold. But Lucas smiled. "No, you certainly aren't. How do you feel about learning to milk a cow? We keep a few for household use." That morning, Sophia discovered that milking was harder than it looked. Her hands cramped, and the patient cow swished her tail in Sophia's face more than once. But by the end of the lesson, she had managed to fill half a pail, and the sense of accomplishment was sweeter than any praise she'd received for her fine embroidery back in Boston. On Sunday, Lucas drove them into Hawthorne for church services. Sophia wore her best dress, a deep blue wool with modest lace at the collar and cuffs. As they approached the small white clapboard building, she grew nervous, knowing curious eyes would be evaluating her. "They don't bite," Lucas murmured as he helped her down from the wagon. "Well, Mrs. Teasdale might, but only if provoked." His joke startled a laugh from Sophia, earning him a grateful glance as they walked toward the church steps. The service was simple but heartfelt, led by Reverend Miller, a bearded man with a booming voice and kind eyes. After the final hymn, Lucas introduced Sophia to what seemed like the entire population of Hawthorne. "This is Miss Sophia Valente," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "She's come from Boston to stay at Meadowlark Ranch." Sophia noted his careful choice of words. He hadn't introduced her as his fiancée or mail-order bride, giving her the dignity of her own identity. The gesture touched her deeply. The townspeople were generally welcoming, though some of the women assessed her with frankly curious stares. Sophia met their gazes steadily, refusing to be intimidated. She had faced far worse scrutiny in her life. "So you're Lucas's Eastern lady," said a short, plump woman with bright eyes. "I'm Harriet Teasdale. My husband owns the general store. We've all been wondering when Lucas would finally find himself a wife. Too handsome a man to stay single so long." Lucas's ears reddened visibly. "Mrs. Teasdale." "Oh, hush, Lucas. I'm just being friendly." She turned back to Sophia. "You come by the store anytime you like, dear. I get catalogs from back east. We can order you anything you need." "Thank you," Sophia said, genuinely touched by the offer. "That's very kind." As they continued to meet people, Sophia noted the respect with which everyone treated Lucas. It wasn't deference exactly, but a clear indication that he was well regarded in the community. On the drive back to the ranch, Sophia commented on this. You seem very respected in town. Lucas shrugged. I try to be fair in my dealings, help when I can. That's all it takes out here. The women were all very interested in me, Sophia observed. Especially Mrs. Teasdale. Lucas chuckled. Harriet's the biggest gossip in 3 counties, but she means well. And she was right about one thing: they've all been after me to find a wife for years. He glanced at her. Was it very uncomfortable for you? No, Sophia said, realizing it was true. Everyone was kind. Different from Boston, where people judge you constantly on your clothes, your connections, your background. Out here, what matters is who you are now, what you can contribute, Lucas said. Your past only matters insofar as it shaped you into the person standing before us today. His words settled over Sophia like a warm blanket. The idea that she could be judged on her present self rather than her past was still novel, still almost too hopeful to believe. The following week brought new experiences. Lucas taught Sophia to ride, starting with gentle Penny in the corral. After her initial nervousness, Sophia discovered she enjoyed the feeling of being on horseback, the height, the connection with the animal, the sense of potential freedom. You're a natural, Lucas said after her 3rd lesson, when she had progressed to riding at a trot around the corral. Most beginners bounce around like a sack of potatoes. Sophia laughed, patting Penny's neck. I think it's more that Penny is forgiving of my mistakes. She is that, Lucas agreed. But you also listen and learn quickly. That's rare. As April turned to May, the ranch grew even busier. The cattle had to be moved to summer pastures, branding needed to be completed, and there were constant repairs to fences and outbuildings. Lucas often returned to the house after dark, too tired for more than a quick meal before retiring. One evening, Mrs. Patterson pulled Sophia aside in the kitchen. Mr. Garrison is working himself too hard, she said bluntly. He won't listen to me anymore, says I fuss too much. But he might listen to you. Me? Sophia was surprised. Why would he listen to me? Mrs. Patterson fixed her with a knowing look. Because he cares what you think, child. Surely you've noticed how his eyes follow you around the room. How he brings you flowers and takes time from his busy days to teach you riding. Sophia felt her cheeks warm. She had noticed, of course, but hadn't allowed herself to think too deeply about what it meant. The idea that Lucas might genuinely care for her, might see her as more than just a potential helpmate, was both thrilling and terrifying. What should I do? She asked. Take him his dinner tonight, Mrs. Patterson suggested. He's mending tack in the barn. Make him stop and eat properly, not just stuff down cold food at midnight. So Sophia found herself crossing the yard as dusk fell, carrying a tray with a plate of still warm stew, fresh bread, and apple cider. The barn door stood partially open, golden lamplight spilling out into the gathering darkness. She paused at the entrance, suddenly unsure. Lucas, may I come in? Sophia. His voice came from the back of the barn. Of course. She found him seated on a stool, surrounded by leather harnesses and tools. His shirt was open at the collar, his sleeves rolled up, and his hands were busy with an awl and heavy thread, repairing a broken strap. Mrs. Patterson thought you might be hungry, Sophia said, setting the tray on a nearby workbench. Lucas set aside his work and stretched, his back cracking audibly. She was right, as usual. Thank you for bringing it out. As he began to eat, Sophia glanced around the barn. It was tidy despite being a working space, with tools hung neatly on pegs and the floor swept clean. The horses watched curiously from their stalls, and the scent of hay and leather created a surprisingly cozy atmosphere. You work too hard, Sophia said before she could lose her nerve. Lucas paused with a spoonful of stew halfway to his mouth. Pardon, Mrs. Patterson is worried about you, so am I. Sophia clasped her hands together to keep them from fidgeting. You're up before dawn and work until late at night. You barely take time to eat." Lucas set down his spoon, studying her with surprise. "I appreciate the concern, but this is normal for spring on a ranch. There's so much to be done before summer. Can't some of it wait? Or can't you hire more help? Good ranch hands are hard to find, especially ones you can trust." Lucas broke off a piece of bread. "And most things can't wait. Nature doesn't operate on our schedule, we operate on hers." Sophia wasn't ready to give up. "But surely not everything is equally urgent. And what good will you be to your ranch if you work yourself sick?" A slow smile spread across Lucas's face. "You sound like my mother. She used to say almost the same thing to my father." "Well, she was right," Sophia insisted. "And so am I." Lucas held up his hands in surrender. "All right, I hear you. I'll try to be more sensible about my hours." His expression softened. "I didn't realize you were worried." "Of course I am," Sophia said, suddenly self-conscious. "You've been kind to me. I don't want to see you run yourself into the ground." Lucas's eyes held hers for a long moment. "Thank you," he said simply. Sophia became aware of how alone they were in the barn, how intimate the space felt in the lamplight. She took a step back. "I should let you finish your meal. Don't stay out too late." As she turned to go, Lucas called after her. "Sophia." When she looked back, he smiled. "I'm glad you're here." 4 simple words, but they warmed her all the way back to the house. The next day brought an unexpected invitation. Lucas asked if Sophia would like to ride with him to check on a remote part of the ranch. "It's about an hour's ride," he explained over breakfast. "Some of the prettiest land on Meadowlark, but I don't get there as often as I should. Thought you might enjoy seeing more of the property." "I'd like that," Sophia said, excited at the prospect of venturing beyond the immediate surroundings of the house for the first time. Mrs. Patterson packed them a lunch, and by mid-morning they were saddled up and heading out. Sophia rode Penny, while Lucas was mounted on Duke. After nearly 2 weeks of lessons, Sophia felt comfortable enough on horseback to enjoy the journey rather than concentrate solely on staying in the saddle. They rode across open grassland, where wildflowers were beginning to bloom in earnest purple lupines, red Indian paintbrush, and tiny white stars whose names Sophia didn't know. Lucas pointed out landmarks as they went, a distinctive rock formation that marked the northeast boundary of his property, a stand of aspens that housed a family of hawks, a spring that never ran dry even in the hottest summers. The land began to rise gradually, and soon they were climbing a gentle slope covered in pine trees. At the top, Lucas reined in, and Sophia gasped at the view that spread before them. Below lay a hidden valley, cradled by hills on 3 sides and protected from harsh winds. A small lake glittered in the center, fed by a stream that cascaded down from higher ground. The shoreline was ringed with willows and cottonwoods just coming into full leaf. The grass grew lush and green, dotted with more wildflowers than Sophia had ever seen in one place. "It's like something from a fairy tale," she breathed. Lucas smiled at her reaction. "This is the heart of Meadowlark. The first time I saw this valley, I knew I had to have it. Spent 2 years working and saving to buy this land." He guided Duke down a narrow trail that switched back and forth across the slope, Sophia following carefully on Penny. When they reached the valley floor, the scent of water and growing things enveloped them. Lucas led them to a grassy spot beneath a large cottonwood near the lake shore. They dismounted, and he spread a blanket from his saddlebag on the ground. "I thought we could have our lunch here," he said, suddenly seeming almost shy. "If that's agreeable to you." "It's perfect," Sophia assured him. They sat on the blanket while the horses grazed nearby, enjoying Mrs. Patterson's cold chicken, biscuits, and apple tarts. The sun was warm but not hot, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and water. You bring all your mail-order brides to this spot?" Sophia asked teasingly, then immediately regretted the question. They had never directly discussed her status since that first day, but Lucas didn't seem offended. "You're the first and only mail-order bride I've ever written to," he said seriously. "And no, I've never brought anyone else here. This place is special to me." "Why did you?" Sophia asked, genuinely curious. "Right for a bride, I mean. A man like you. Surely there are women in the territory who would be interested." Lucas was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "There are some, I suppose, but most women out here are already married or spoken for. The few who aren't." He shrugged. "Let's just say we didn't suit, and I'm not one for saloon girls or the like." He picked a blade of grass, twisting it between his fingers. "I've been building this ranch for 7 years, made it profitable, made it a place I'm proud of. But coming home to an empty house every night." He looked out over the lake. "A man starts to wonder what it's all for if there's no one to share it with, no one to leave it to someday." Sophia nodded, understanding completely. "And why Boston? Why advertise so far away? Truth." Lucas glanced at her, a hint of color in his cheeks. "I thought an Eastern woman might be better educated, might bring some culture and refinement that's lacking out here. Selfish of me, perhaps." "Not selfish," Sophia corrected. "Honest. We all want companions who share our interests, our values." "And you?" Lucas asked after a moment. "Why answer an advertisement from a stranger in Wyoming Territory? There must have been safer options." Sophia's hand stilled in her lap. This was the opening she had both dreaded and needed the chance to explain herself, to unburden at least some of her secrets. "I needed to get far away," she said simply. "As far as possible." Lucas waited, neither pushing nor withdrawing. "I was married before," Sophia finally said, the words tumbling out. "In Boston. His name was Henry Blackwell. He seemed charming at first, attentive. My father had died, leaving my mother and me in difficult circumstances. Henry offered security, respectability." She swallowed hard. "It was only after the wedding that I discovered his true nature." Lucas's expression remained steady, though she saw a muscle tick in his jaw. "He was cruel," Sophia continued, forcing herself to meet Lucas's gaze. "Not just with his fists, though there was that too. But in ways that left no visible marks: isolation, humiliation, constant criticism. He controlled everything: what I wore, whom I spoke to, when I could leave the house." She absently rubbed her wrist where the scar circled like a bracelet. "Sometimes, when he'd been drinking, he would tie me to the bed. Said it was to keep me from running away while he slept. I still have the scars." Lucas's eyes flicked to her wrist but quickly returned to her face, giving her the dignity of his full attention. "My mother died 2 years into the marriage," Sophia continued. "After that, there was no one watching, no one he needed to pretend for. Things got worse." She took a deep breath. "Last winter, during a particularly bad episode, he broke 3 of my ribs and my collarbone. I thought I would die that night. Perhaps I would have, but he was called away unexpectedly. His business was in trouble. While he was gone, I gathered what courage I had left and went to the only person who might help our housekeeper, Mrs. Quinn. She had slipped me food when Henry withheld it as punishment. She knew." Sophia smoothed her skirt, needing something to do with her hands. "Mrs. Quinn had a brother in New York. She gave me money from her own savings and helped me escape. I made it to New York, but I was terrified Henry would find me. His business connections were extensive. So when I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, it seemed like Providence. Wyoming was so far away, so completely removed from my past life." She finally looked up, her heart pounding. "So you see, I came here as much to escape as to begin anew. I'm sorry I wasn't honest from the start." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, His voice was gentle but strained, as if he were carefully controlling stronger emotions. "You have nothing to apologize for, Sophia." "Nothing at all," he hesitated. "Is he looking for you, do you think?" "I don't know," Sophia admitted. "Mrs. Quinn arranged for a notice to be placed in the Boston papers stating that I had died of pneumonia while visiting relatives. She even arranged a small funeral. But Henry is not a man who accepts defeat easily." Lucas nodded, processing this information. "Thank you for trusting me with the truth," he said finally. "It can't have been easy to speak of such things." "It wasn't," Sophia agreed, "but you deserve to know, especially since—" She faltered. "Since what?" Lucas prompted gently. "Since I'm considering staying. Permanently." The words were barely above a whisper, but they hung in the air between them, full of meaning. Lucas's expression changed then, something like hope lighting his eyes. "Are you?" Sophia nodded, unable to find more words. "I would like that very much," Lucas said simply. "But only if it's truly what you want, not out of necessity or fear, but because you choose it." "I think it is what I want," Sophia said carefully. "These weeks at Meadowlark, I felt safe for the first time in years. Not just physically safe, but seen, respected." She met his gaze directly. "You've been more honorable, more patient than I had any right to expect from a stranger. You deserve nothing less," Lucas said firmly. Sophia smiled, feeling lighter for having shared her burden. "So what happens now?" "Now," Lucas looked out over the lake where ripples spread from a jumping fish. "Now we continue as we have been. You take the time you need. When if you decide you want to marry me, we'll ride into Hawthorne and find the preacher." He glanced back at her. "No rush, no pressure." "And if I decide otherwise?" Sophia asked, testing him. "Then I'll honor my promise and see you safely to wherever you want to go next." The pain that flashed across his face at the thought was quickly masked, but Sophia caught it. She reached out hesitantly and touched his hand where it rested on the blanket between them. "Thank you, Lucas." He turned his palm up, gently capturing her fingers in his. The touch was electric, sending warmth up her arm and into her chest. "You're welcome, Sophia." They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined, looking out over the peaceful lake. For the first time in years, Sophia felt not just the absence of fear, but the presence of something new, something that felt suspiciously like happiness. The ride back to the ranch was companionable, the silence between them comfortable rather than strained. Sophia felt as though a great weight had lifted from her shoulders. She had shared her darkest secret, and Lucas had not recoiled or dismissed her. Instead, he had listened, believed, and still wanted her to stay. Over the next week, subtle changes emerged in their relationship. Lucas began finding more reasons to be around the house during the day, small repairs that suddenly became urgent, books he needed from his study, questions about dinner that could easily have been asked of Mrs. Patterson. Sophia found herself watching for him, her heart quickening when she heard his footsteps on the porch. For his part, Lucas seemed more at ease with her, less careful to maintain a formal distance. He would lightly touch her elbow to guide her through a doorway, or rest his hand briefly on her shoulder when looking at something she was reading. These small intimacies, innocent as they were, awakened sensations in Sophia that she had forgotten existed or perhaps had never truly experienced before. One evening after dinner, Lucas invited her to join him on the porch. The late May air was mild, scented with pine and the roses Mrs. Patterson had planted along the front of the house years ago. They sat in comfortable rocking chairs, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "I've been thinking," Lucas said after a comfortable silence. "The Founders' Day dance is coming up in Hawthorne next weekend. It's a tradition, marks the anniversary of the town's founding. There's music, food, dancing. Sophia waited, sensing there was more to come. I wondered if you might like to attend with me. Lucas glanced at her, then back at the horizon. As my guest, of course. The formal invitation, so carefully phrased to give her freedom to decline, touched Sophia deeply. I'd like that very much, she replied. Lucas smiled, clearly pleased. It's nothing fancy like you'd have seen in Boston. Just folks gathering in the town hall, bringing food to share, dancing to whatever music we can muster. But it's a good way to meet more of the community. It sounds wonderful, Sophia assured him, although she hesitated. I don't have anything suitable to wear for a dance. Ah. Lucas considered this. Would you like to visit Mrs. Teasdale's store tomorrow? She might have fabric you could use. You mentioned you're handy with a needle. So the next day found them in Hawthorne, entering the general store where Harriet Teasdale greeted them with undisguised delight. Lucas Garrison and Miss Valente, what a pleasant surprise. Her bright eyes missed nothing, including the way Lucas stood protectively close to Sophia. What can I help you with today? Miss Valente needs fabric for a dress, Lucas explained. For the Founders' Day dance. Mrs. Teasdale clasped her hands together. Oh, how lovely. You're escorting Miss Valente to the dance, then? If she'll have me, Lucas replied with a smile that made Sophia's heart flutter. Well, I have just the thing, Mrs. Teasdale declared, leading them to a shelf stacked with bolts of fabric. This just came in last week from St. Louis, finest quality. She pulled out a bolt of soft green cotton with a subtle pattern of tiny leaves woven into the fabric. This would be perfect with your coloring, dear, she told Sophia. Brings out those pretty eyes of yours. Sophia touched the fabric, which was indeed finer than she had expected to find in a frontier town. It's beautiful, she admitted. Take as much as you need, Lucas said, and anything else you require for the dress. With Mrs. Teasdale's enthusiastic assistance, Sophia selected the green fabric, thread, buttons, and a length of cream-colored lace for trim. When Lucas insisted on paying, Sophia started to protest, but something in his expression stopped her. This was important to him to provide for her, to give her this small luxury. Thank you, she said instead, accepting his generosity with grace. On the way back to the ranch, they stopped at the post office where Lucas checked for mail. He returned to the wagon with several letters and a small parcel. Anything interesting? Sophia asked. Just business correspondence mostly, Lucas replied, tucking the mail into his jacket pocket. And a package from Chicago I've been expecting. That afternoon, Sophia began work on her dress. Mrs. Patterson offered the use of her sewing machine, a prized singer that had been brought west at great expense years earlier. With her experience as a seamstress, Sophia quickly cut and assembled the basic shape of the dress, creating a style that was both modest and flattering, with a fitted bodice and full skirt perfect for dancing. The day before the dance, Lucas knocked on the door of her room where she was putting the finishing touches on her creation. May I come in? He called. Of course, Sophia replied, setting aside her needle. Lucas entered, holding a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. I have something for you, he said, uncharacteristically hesitant. A gift for tomorrow night. Sophia accepted the package with surprise. Lucas, you've already done so much, please, he interrupted gently. I want you to have this. She carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal a velvet-covered box. Inside, nestled on a bed of silk, lay a delicate necklace of silver filigree with a small emerald pendant. It was beautiful without being ostentatious, elegant in its simplicity. Oh, Sophia breathed, touching it lightly with her fingertip. It's exquisite. It reminded me of your eyes, Lucas said, a hint of color rising in his cheeks, and it will complement your dress. This is what you ordered from Chicago, Sophia realized. But how did you know what color my dress would be? Lucas smiled. I didn't. But when I saw the green fabric at Mrs. Teasdale's, I was relieved the necklace would match. Sophia carefully lifted the necklace from its box. Would you help me put it on? Lucas took the delicate chain, his large hands surprisingly dexterous with the tiny clasp. Sophia turned her back to him, lifting her hair away from her neck. She felt his fingers brush her skin as he fastened the necklace, and a shiver ran down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. There, he said, his voice low. Sophia turned to face him, her hand going to the pendant that now nestled at the base of her throat. How does it look? Lucas studied her for a long moment, his expression softening. Beautiful, he said simply. Like you. The sincerity in his voice made Sophia's heart race. Thank you, she whispered. For a moment it seemed Lucas might say more, might even move closer. But instead he stepped back, clearing his throat. I should let you finish your sewing. Mrs. Patterson needs help with some chores before dinner. After he left, Sophia stood for a long time looking at herself in the small mirror over her dresser, her fingers touching the emerald pendant. The woman who gazed back at her seemed different from the frightened creature who had stepped off the train barely a month ago. There was color in her cheeks, a light in her eyes that had been absent for too long. The night of the dance arrived with perfect late spring weather, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. Sophia dressed carefully in her new green gown, which fit perfectly and swished pleasantly around her ankles when she moved. The emerald pendant gleamed at her throat, and she had arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than usual, with soft curls framing her face. When she descended the stairs, Lucas was waiting in the main room, dressed in his best clothes, dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a black vest. He had trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, and for a moment, Sophia felt as though she were seeing him truly for the first time. Lucas stared at her as she came down the stairs, his expression one of undisguised admiration. Sophia, he breathed, you look. There aren't words. Mrs. Patterson, watching from the doorway to the kitchen, gave an approving nod. You both look fit to meet the president himself, she declared. Now off with you, or you'll be late. The drive into Hawthorne was magical in the soft evening light. Sophia sat close to Lucas on the wagon seat, more aware than ever of his presence beside her, the clean scent of soap and leather, the strength in his hands as he handled the reins, the way his eyes kept finding her when he thought she wasn't looking. The town hall was transformed for the occasion, with lanterns hanging from the rafters, wildflowers in mason jars on every table, and a space cleared for dancing. A small group of musicians, 2 fiddlers, a guitar player, and an elderly man with a harmonica were setting up in one corner. As they entered, heads turned and Sophia felt the weight of curious stares. Lucas must have sensed her tension, for he placed his hand gently at the small of her back, a silent gesture of support and belonging. Lucas, Miss Valente. Grace Harper approached, resplendent in a deep blue dress that must have been fashionable a decade earlier but was still handsome. Don't you two make a fine pair? Mrs. Harper, Lucas greeted her with a smile. You're looking well. Passable for an old ranch woman, she replied with a twinkle in her eye. But your Miss Valente puts us all to shame. That's a lovely dress, my dear. Did you make it yourself? I did, Sophia acknowledged, though Lucas provided the fabric. Always did have good taste, this one, Mrs. Harper said with approval. Come, let me introduce you to some folks you haven't met yet. What followed was a whirlwind of introductions: the blacksmith and his wife, the school teacher, the banker, ranchers from neighboring properties, and countless others whose names Sophia knew she would never remember all at once. Everyone was welcoming, though she didn't miss the speculative glances between Lucas and herself, When the music began, Lucas turned to her with a formal bow. "Would you honor me with this dance, Miss Valente?" "I would be delighted, Mr. Garrison," Sophia replied, placing her hand in his. The song was a simple waltz, and Lucas proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer for such a large man. His hand was warm at her waist as he guided her around the floor, and Sophia found herself relaxing into his lead, enjoying the simple pleasure of movement and music. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, curious. "My mother insisted," Lucas replied with a smile. "Said no son of hers would grow up to be a clumsy oaf. She taught all us boys before we were tall enough to look her in the eye. Us boys, my brothers. 2 older, 1 younger. They're all back east still, Pennsylvania and Ohio." "Do you miss them?" Sophia asked. Lucas considered this as he guided her through a turn. "Sometimes, we write. The youngest, Daniel, has talked of coming west someday, but we each found our own paths." He looked down at her. "What about you?" "Any siblings?" Sophia shook her head. "Just me and my mother after my father died, and then just me." A shadow crossed her face at the memory of her lonely years of marriage. Lucas, sensing the change in her mood, pulled her slightly closer. "Not anymore," he said softly. "Not if you don't want to be." Sophia looked up at him, seeing the promise in his eyes. "No," she agreed. "Not anymore." As the evening progressed, they danced several more times, shared food from the laden tables, and spoke with nearly everyone in attendance. Sophia was introduced as Lucas's friend from Boston, a description that raised knowing eyebrows but forestalled direct questions about their relationship. During a particularly lively tune, Lucas was called away to help move some tables to make more room for dancing. Sophia found herself momentarily alone near the refreshment table, watching the swirl of dancers. "Miss Valente, isn't it?" a voice beside her said. Sophia turned to see a well-dressed man of about 40, with graying hair at his temples and a mustache waxed to sharp points. There was something about his smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "And you are James Sullivan, owner of the Silver Dollar Saloon." He gestured toward the main street, where the establishment in question was presumably located. "I don't believe we've been introduced properly." "No, I don't believe we have," Sophia agreed, looking around for Lucas. "You're staying with Garrison, I understand," Sullivan continued. "Quite the setup he has at Meadowlark, one of the finest spreads in the territory." "Yes, it's a beautiful ranch," Sophia said, increasingly uncomfortable with the man's assessing gaze. "A man like Garrison needs a proper wife," Sullivan observed, his eyes traveling over Sophia in a way that made her skin crawl. "Someone who understands the refinements of life." "I've often thought he was wasting himself out here among the provincials." Before Sophia could respond, Lucas appeared at her side, his expression hardening as he took in Sullivan. "James," he said coolly, "I see you've met Miss Valente." "Indeed," Sullivan replied with a thin smile. "A charming addition to our little community. You're to be congratulated on your good fortune." Something in his tone made Lucas's jaw tighten. "Miss Valente, I believe they're playing our song," he said, offering his arm. Grateful for the rescue, Sophia placed her hand on his arm. "Excuse us, Mr. Sullivan." As Lucas led her toward the dance floor, Sophia felt him relax slightly. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "Sullivan isn't the most gentlemanly of men." "I gathered that," Sophia replied dryly. "Is he always so presumptuous?" "Always," Lucas confirmed. "He fancies himself a businessman, but most of his ventures skirt the edge of legality. The Silver Dollar is the most reputable of his enterprises, which isn't saying much." He glanced down at her. "I hope he didn't make you too uncomfortable." "Nothing I couldn't handle," Sophia assured him, though in truth, something about Sullivan had unsettled her deeply. There had been calculation in his gaze, an assessment that went beyond normal curiosity about a newcomer. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, with more dancing, conversation, and laughter. By the time they climbed back into the wagon for the ride home, Sophia's feet ached pleasantly and her cheeks hurt from smiling more than she had in years. The night was clear, with a half-moon illuminating the landscape in silver light. Stars crowded the sky, more brilliant than Sophia had ever seen them in Boston. "Did you enjoy yourself?" Lucas asked as they traveled the now familiar road to Meadowlark. "Very much," Sophia replied truthfully. "Everyone was so welcoming. I didn't expect. That is, I thought people might be more judgmental about a mail-order bride." Lucas's hands tightened on the reins briefly. "You're not just a mail-order bride, Sophia. You're a woman who made a brave choice to start a new life. There's nothing shameful in that." He glanced at her. "Besides, half the women in that room came west for similar reasons, following husbands or dreams or just seeking something different from what they knew back east. We're all transplants here in one way or another." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clop of the horses' hooves. "Sophia," Lucas said eventually, his voice low and serious, "I need to ask you something." "Yes." She turned to look at him, struck by his profile in the moonlight. "These weeks you've been at Meadowlark. Have you been happy?" The question caught her off guard with its directness. Sophia considered it carefully, knowing Lucas deserved nothing less than complete honesty. "Yes," she said finally. "Happier than I've been in a very long time." "Maybe happier than I've ever been." Lucas nodded as if confirming something to himself. "The preacher will be in Hawthorne next Sunday," he said. That is, I wondered if you might have reached a decision about staying, about us." Sophia's heart raced. This was it, the moment of choice she had known was coming. She had spent sleepless nights weighing her options, examining her feelings, trying to separate fear from desire, practicality from emotion. "Lucas," she began carefully, "when I came here, I was running away from something terrible. I was desperate, afraid, willing to marry a stranger if it meant escape." She paused. "But these past weeks, I've discovered something unexpected. I'm not just running away anymore. I've found something I want to run toward." She turned to face him more directly. "Yes, I've reached a decision. If you still want me, I would be honored to become your wife." Lucas pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to look at her fully, his face illuminated by moonlight. "Are you certain? I don't want you to feel obligated because of our arrangement or because you have nowhere else to go." "I'm certain," Sophia said firmly. "I'm choosing you not out of necessity or fear, but because I want to, because I—" She hesitated, then found her courage. "Because I care for you, Lucas, deeply." The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Sophia," he breathed, reaching for her hands. "I've cared for you since your third letter, when you wrote about teaching yourself to identify birds from a book, because it made you feel connected to something larger than yourself. I cared for you more when I saw you step off that train, terrified but brave enough to come anyway. And every day since, my feelings have only grown stronger." He raised her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Nothing would make me happier than to make you my wife." In that moment, with the vast Wyoming sky above them and the promise of Meadowlark waiting ahead, Sophia felt the last of her fears melt away. There was no place for fear here, not in this land, not in this life, and certainly not in the love growing between them. "Then yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Next Sunday, let's be married." The week that followed passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Mrs. Patterson was overjoyed at the news, embracing Sophia with tears in her eyes. "I knew from the moment I saw you that you were the one for him," she declared. A man can build all the houses and barns he wants, but it takes a woman to make a home. Together, they planned a simple celebration to follow the ceremony. Friends from neighboring ranches and the town would be invited to Meadowlark for a meal and perhaps some dancing. Mrs. Harper promised to bring her famous peach cobbler, and other women volunteered dishes as well. Lucas rode into town to speak with the preacher, returning with a plain gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. "If you'd prefer something fancier, we can order from Chicago," he offered. But Sophia shook her head, touched by the family connection. "This is perfect," she assured him, trying it on. It fit as if made for her. In the evenings, they began to plan their future together more concretely. Lucas showed Sophia the account books for the ranch, explaining the operation in greater detail than before. "I want you to understand everything," he said. "This will be your livelihood too, your home. No secrets between us." Sophia appreciated his openness, his determination to treat her as a true partner. In return, she shared more of her own past stories of her childhood in Massachusetts, her father's work as a professor before his untimely death, her mother's struggles afterward. She even spoke more about her marriage to Henry, though those memories were still painful to revisit. "He was a respected businessman," she explained one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "No one would have believed me if I'd spoken up about his treatment. He was careful, you see, never leaving marks where they would show, always charming in public. He cultivated powerful friends, made himself indispensable to them." Lucas listened, his expression grave. "Men like that exist everywhere, even here in the West. They hide their true nature behind respectability. Like Mr. Sullivan." Sophia asked, remembering her uncomfortable encounter at the dance. Lucas nodded. "Sullivan has a reputation for how he treats the girls who work in his saloon. Nothing that can be proven, but there are stories." He looked at her directly. "I won't let anyone hurt you, Sophia. Not ever again." She believed him, not because she thought him capable of violence on her behalf, but because she had seen the depth of his integrity, his fundamental decency. Lucas would stand between her and harm not through force, but through the strength of his character and his position in the community. On Saturday, the day before the wedding, a letter arrived from Boston. Mrs. Patterson brought it in from town with the other mail, her expression concerned as she handed it to Sophia. "This came for you, dear. I didn't know anyone in Boston knew you were here." Sophia stared at the envelope, her heart freezing in her chest. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the return address belonged to Mrs. Quinn, the housekeeper who had helped her escape. With trembling fingers, she opened it, scanning the contents quickly. Then she read it again, more carefully, the blood draining from her face. Lucas, who had been reviewing cattle prices at the table, noticed her distress immediately. "Sophia, what is it?" "Henry," she whispered, the letter shaking in her hand. "He knows I'm alive. Mrs. Quinn writes that he's been making inquiries, offering rewards for information about me. He's discovered I went west. She wanted to warn me." Lucas was on his feet instantly, crossing to her side. "Does she say he knows you're in Wyoming? In Hawthorne?" Sophia shook her head. "No, just that he knows I went west. But Lucas, he won't stop looking. I know him. He sees me as his property, something that was stolen from him. He won't rest until he finds me." Lucas gently took the letter, reading it himself. Then he set it aside and took Sophia's cold hands in his warm ones. "Listen to me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You are not alone anymore. You have me, Mrs. Patterson, friends in the community. Even if he were to find you, he would face more opposition than he could imagine." "You don't know him," Sophia insisted. "He's vindictive, persistent. And he has money connections." "Money and connections count for less out here than character and friends," Lucas countered. "Besides, Tomorrow you'll be Sophia Garrison, not Sophia Valente or Blackwell. Your legal status will change. He'll have no claim on you whatsoever." Sophia wanted desperately to believe him, to feel the security he was offering. But the specter of Henry had reawakened fears she thought she had conquered. Seeing her continued distress, Lucas made a decision. "I'm going to ride into town and speak with Sheriff Taylor. I won't give details of your situation without your permission, but I want him aware that there might be an Eastern man asking questions about a woman matching your description." "Will that help?" Sophia asked. "It can't hurt," Lucas replied. "Taylor's a good man, discreet, and he knows everyone who comes through Hawthorne." While Lucas was gone, Sophia paced the house, alternating between fear and anger. How dare Henry continue to disrupt her life, to threaten her newfound happiness from hundreds of miles away? She had begun to believe she was truly free of him, and now this letter had thrown everything into question. Mrs. Patterson found her in the kitchen, staring blindly out the window. "Whatever that letter said, it's upset you terribly," the older woman observed. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Sophia turned to her, grateful for the concern. "Just being here helps," she admitted. "I'm afraid my past may have followed me west." Mrs. Patterson nodded sagely. "The past has a way of doing that, but you know what's stronger than the past? The future we choose." She patted Sophia's hand. "And you've chosen a good future with a good man. Don't let old ghosts steal your joy." When Lucas returned, his expression was resolute. "Sheriff Taylor will keep an eye out," he reported, "and I've asked a few trusted friends to do the same. If any stranger starts asking about you, we'll know immediately." "And then what?" Sophia asked. "What if he does find me?" Lucas took her gently by the shoulders. "Then he'll discover that you are no longer the vulnerable woman he terrorized. You're stronger now, Sophia, and you're not alone." His eyes held hers steadily. "Do you still want to marry me tomorrow?" "Yes," Sophia said without hesitation, "more than ever. Then we'll face whatever comes together, as husband and wife." He drew her close, and Sophia rested her head against his chest, drawing strength from his solid presence. That night, her last as an unmarried woman, Sophia stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the starlit landscape of Meadowlark. The fear was still there, a knot in her stomach that tightened when she thought of Henry searching for her. But beside it now was a fiercer emotion, determination. She had fought too hard, come too far to let him steal this new life from her. "He has no place here," she whispered to herself, echoing Lucas's words from that first day. "Fear has no place in our home." Sunday dawned clear and bright, a perfect June day for a wedding. Sophia dressed carefully in a new gown she had made for the occasion, cream-colored cotton with lace trim, simple but elegant. Mrs. Patterson helped her arrange her hair, weaving wildflowers into the dark strands. "You look beautiful," the older woman said, stepping back to admire her work. "Like a true Wyoming bride." Lucas had left at first light to make final arrangements in town, promising to send the wagon for Sophia and Mrs. Patterson later. When it arrived, driven by Tommy, the young ranch hand, Sophia felt a flutter of nerves that had nothing to do with her fears about Henry. She was getting married, not out of desperation or for protection, but because she had found a man she respected, admired, and yes, loved, though she had not yet spoken that word aloud to him. The small church in Hawthorne was filled with familiar faces, neighbors, townspeople, friends they had made in the brief time Sophia had been at Meadowlark. Mrs. Harper sat in the front pew, resplendent in purple silk that must have been her Sunday best for decades. The Teasdales were there, Harriet dabbing at her eyes already, though the ceremony hadn't begun. Even Sheriff Taylor stood at the back, his usual stern expression softened for the occasion. Lucas waited for her at the altar, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him in a new black suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes finding hers the moment she appeared in the doorway. The love in his gaze was so apparent that Sophia felt her fears about Henry recede even further. The ceremony was simple and traditional. Reverend Miller spoke of commitment, partnership, and building a life together on the foundation of mutual respect. When the time came for vows, Lucas's voice was steady and sure, promising to cherish and protect, to honor and respect, to stand beside her in good times and bad. When it was Sophia's turn, she spoke clearly, her voice growing stronger with each word. I, Sophia, take you, Lucas, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to be a faithful and loving wife, to respect and support you, to build a home and a future with you, and to face whatever challenges may come, secure in the knowledge that we face them together. The exchanging of rings followed the simple gold band for Sophia, a matching one for Lucas. And then, Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, inviting Lucas to kiss his bride. It was their first kiss, and Sophia felt a moment of nervousness as Lucas bent toward her. But his lips were gentle on hers, warm and reassuring, conveying tenderness rather than possession. When they parted, the look they shared was one of promise and hope. The celebration at Meadowlark afterward was everything a Western wedding party should be: abundant food, music provided by local musicians, dancing on a wooden platform Lucas and the hands had constructed in the yard. Lanterns hung from tree branches to provide light as the afternoon stretched into evening, and children played games in the grass while their parents celebrated. Sophia moved through it all in a happy daze, accepting congratulations, dancing with her new husband, feeling truly part of the community for the first time. Lucas rarely left her side, his hand finding the small of her back or her fingers intertwining with his as if they couldn't bear to be disconnected for long. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Lucas leaned close to her ear. "Are you happy, Mrs. Garrison?" The name sent a thrill through Sophia. Mrs. Garrison, a new identity freely chosen. "Very happy, Mr. Garrison," she replied with a smile. "Good," he said, his eyes warm, "because I intend to spend the rest of my life ensuring you stay that way." Later, after the guests had departed and Mrs. Patterson had retired to her quarters, Sophia found herself alone with Lucas for the first time as husband and wife. He had carried her trunk to the master bedroom, his room, now theirs, and she stood in the doorway, suddenly shy. The room was larger than her guest chamber, with a big bed covered in a quilt Mrs. Patterson had made, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand, and a comfortable chair by the window. Lucas had added vases of wildflowers on the dresser and nightstand, and fresh candles burned in the holders. "I want you to be comfortable," he said, noting her hesitation. "We can take things as slowly as you need." His consideration brought tears to Sophia's eyes. How different from her first wedding night, when Henry had claimed his rights with brutal efficiency, caring nothing for her fear or discomfort. "Thank you," she whispered, stepping into the room that was now hers as much as his, "for understanding." Lucas closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "Sophia, I meant what I said that first day. Fear has no place in our home, especially not between us." He raised one hand to gently cup her cheek. "I will never do anything to harm you or frighten you, I swear it." Sophia leaned into his touch, her heart full. "I know," she said simply. "I trust you, Lucas, completely." When he kissed her this time, there was more than tenderness, there was longing, carefully restrained but unmistakable. Sophia responded in kind, letting herself feel desire without fear for the first time. That night, in the darkness of their shared room, Lucas taught her that physical love could be gentle, mutual, even joyful. And Sophia discovered that the body that had known only pain could also know pleasure, that the heart that had been hardened by cruelty could soften with tenderness. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Sophia finally said the words that had been growing inside her. "I love you, Lucas." He tightened his arms around her. "And I love you, Sophia, more than I thought possible." She fell asleep that night feeling truly safe for the first time in years, knowing that whatever the future held, even if it included Henry somehow finding her, she was no longer facing it alone. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Sophia's life. She and Lucas settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. Each day brought new discoveries: his habit of singing quietly to the horses as he groomed them, her unexpected skill at breaking up fights among the barn cats, the way they both preferred the crust of fresh bread to the middle. Sophia threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, learning to ride well enough to accompany Lucas on his rounds, helping Mrs. Patterson preserve the summer bounty from the garden, even assisting when a mare gave birth to a foal in the middle of the night. Her city-bred hands grew calloused, her skin tanned in the Wyoming sun, and her confidence blossomed. Lucas watched her transformation with pride and growing love. The frightened woman who had stepped off the train that April day was still recognizable in his wife, but now her eyes held joy more often than fear, and her laughter came easily and often. July turned to August, and the heat of summer settled over the land. The days were long, filled with work, and the nights were for each other, talking, loving, planning their future together. They spoke of children, of expanding the ranch, of traveling east someday to visit Lucas's family. The letter from Boston receded in Sophia's mind, not forgotten but no longer a constant shadow over her happiness. Sheriff Taylor reported no strangers asking questions, and life in Hawthorne continued its peaceful rhythm, until the day the stagecoach brought a visitor. Sophia was in town with Lucas, shopping at the general store for supplies, when the weekly stage rolled in. They paid it little mind the arrival was a regular event, bringing mail and occasional passengers to the small community. It was only when they emerged from the store, arms laden with packages, that Sophia's world tilted on its axis. A man had descended from the stage and was speaking with the driver, his back to them. But even from behind, there was something horribly familiar about his posture, the set of his shoulders, the way he gestured with his right hand. When he turned, scanning the main street with a proprietary air, Sophia's worst fears were confirmed. Henry Blackwell had found her. The packages slipped from her nerveless fingers, thudding to the boardwalk. Lucas turned to her in concern, then followed her frozen gaze to the stranger. Understanding dawned immediately. "Is that him?" he asked quietly, stepping in front of her protectively. Sophia nodded, unable to speak, her throat closed with terror. "Get inside," Lucas said, his voice calm but brooking no argument. "Go to Sheriff Taylor's office. I'll handle this." "Lucas, no," Sophia managed, finding her voice. "You don't know what he's capable of." "Neither does he know what I'm capable of," Lucas replied grimly. "Go, Sophia. Now." Something in his tone galvanized her. Sophia gathered her skirts and hurried down the boardwalk toward the sheriff's office, keeping her head down, praying Henry hadn't spotted her. She burst into the small building, startling Sheriff Taylor, who was reading a wanted poster at his desk. "Mrs. Garrison," he said, rising to his feet. "What's wrong?" "He's here," Sophia gasped. "Henry Blackwell. My first husband, the man Lucas warned you about." Taylor's expression hardened. "Where?" "Just arrived on the stage. Lucas is still out there." The sheriff checked his gun, then gestured to a chair. Stay here. Lock the door behind me." Sophia did as instructed, then moved to the window, peering through the dusty glass with her heart in her throat. She could see Lucas approaching Henry, who was now speaking with the hotel proprietor across the street. Even from this distance, she could read the tension in Lucas's stance, the careful way he positioned himself. Outside, Lucas introduced himself to the man who had caused Sophia so much pain. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm Lucas Garrison." Henry turned, eyebrows raised at being addressed by a stranger. He was a handsome man in an austere way, expensively dressed but with cold eyes that assessed Lucas as if determining his worth. "Do I know you, sir?" he asked, his Boston accent pronounced against Lucas's Western cadence. "No, but I know who you are and why you're here," Lucas replied evenly. "You're looking for Sophia Valente, your wife." Henry's expression sharpened. "You know where she is?" "I do." Lucas stood his ground as Sheriff Taylor approached from behind. "But there's something you should know. Sophia Valente doesn't exist anymore." Henry's face flushed with anger. "What are you talking about? What have you done with her?" "Nothing she didn't want," Lucas said. "Sophia is now my wife. Legally married under the laws of Wyoming Territory." "That's impossible," Henry sputtered. "She's already married. To me." "Not according to the notice of your wife's death that appeared in the Boston papers," Sheriff Taylor interjected, joining the conversation. "Taylor, Sheriff of Hawthorne County." Henry's eyes narrowed as he took in the badge. "There was no death. That was a deception. My wife ran away and I have come to reclaim her, as is my legal right." "Actually, it's not that simple," Taylor said, his voice deceptively casual. "You see, out here in Wyoming, we have some different ideas about marriage and divorce than they do back east. A woman abandoned by her husband for over a year can petition for divorce. A woman whose death was publicly announced and who was presumed dead is, for all legal purposes, free to remarry." "This is absurd," Henry said dismissively. "I'm a respected businessman from Boston. I have the law on my side." "Boston law doesn't extend to Wyoming Territory," Lucas said quietly. "And even if you had a legal claim, which you don't, Sophia is no longer yours to command. She has built a new life here, a happy one." Henry's expression turned ugly. "I see. You've taken advantage of a confused, unstable woman. Sophia has always been emotionally fragile, prone to hysteria and delusions. I've come to take her home where she can receive proper care." Lucas's hands curled into fists at his sides, but his voice remained controlled. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm going to say this once, and I suggest you listen carefully. Sophia is my wife now. She is well respected in this community, known for her intelligence and character. Any claims you make about her mental state will be met with disbelief and suspicion about your motives." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only Henry and the sheriff could hear. "I also know exactly what kind of man you are, what you did to her, the scars she still bears from your care. If you attempt to force her to return with you, I cannot be responsible for how the men of this town might react to such information." Henry paled slightly but rallied quickly. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Garrison?" "No," Lucas replied. "I'm simply informing you of the facts. Sophia is safe here, protected not just by me but by an entire community that values her. Whatever legal maneuvers you might attempt would take months, possibly years, to resolve. During that time, she would remain here as my wife." Sheriff Taylor nodded in agreement. "Territorial courts move at their own pace, Mr. Blackwell, and they tend to favor locals over outsiders, especially when the locals are as well regarded as the Garrisons." Henry looked between them, calculation evident in his cold eyes. "I want to see her, to speak with her. Then I'll decide my next steps." "That's not your decision to make," Lucas said firmly. "If Sophia wishes to speak with you, that will be her choice, Not yours, not mine, hers. From her vantage point in the sheriff's office, Sophia watched the confrontation with her heart in her throat. She couldn't hear the words, but she could see Henry's growing frustration, the way Lucas stood his ground, the sheriff's supportive presence. When Henry's expression turned thunderous, she knew the conversation was not going well for him. A knock at the door startled her. "Mrs. Garrison." "It's Grace Harper. Sheriff Taylor sent word you might need some company." Sophia unlocked the door to admit the older woman, who took in her pale face and trembling hands with a quick, assessing glance. "So that's him, is it? The man who hurt you?" Mrs. Harper didn't wait for confirmation. "Well, he's picked the wrong town to bring his Eastern notions of ownership." "I'm afraid," Sophia admitted, "not just of what he might do to me, but what might happen to Lucas if Henry provokes him." Mrs. Harper patted her hand. "Lucas Garrison has a better head on his shoulders than most men. He won't be goaded into violence unless there's no other choice." Outside, the confrontation was reaching its climax. Henry, realizing he was outmaneuvered for the moment, tried another approach. "I only want what's best for Sophia," he said, his tone reasonable. "We had a good life in Boston. A comfortable home, social standing, financial security. What can you offer her here, Mr. Garrison? A crude existence in the wilderness, hard work and isolation. Sophia was raised for better things." "Sophia was raised to be her own woman, make her own choices," Lucas countered. "And she's chosen this life, with me." He gestured around at the small but thriving town. "This isn't the wilderness, Mr. Blackwell. This is a community. People who look out for each other, who value character over wealth, actions over words." Henry's facade of reasonableness cracked. "She is my wife," he hissed. "Mine. I will not leave without her." "Then you'll be staying in Wyoming a very long time," Sheriff Taylor drawled, "because the only way you're taking Mrs. Garrison anywhere is if she chooses to go." He hooked his thumbs in his belt. "Now, I suggest you check into the hotel and cool down. Any disturbance of the peace in my town will result in a night in my jail, Eastern businessman or not." Henry glared at them both, but years of calculating his advantages had taught him when to retreat temporarily. "This isn't over," he said to Lucas. "I have resources, connections. I will pursue every legal avenue to reclaim what is mine." "Sophia isn't property," Lucas said, his voice finally betraying anger. "She never was. That you think of her that way tells me everything I need to know about the kind of husband you were." With a final glare, Henry turned and stalked toward the hotel, his rigid posture betraying his fury. Lucas watched him go, then immediately headed for the sheriff's office, concern for Sophia overriding all else. When he entered and saw her standing by the window, pale but composed, relief washed over him. "Are you all right?" he asked, crossing to her in 2 long strides. Sophia nodded, though her hands still trembled. "I saw you speaking with him. What did he say? What does he want?" "Exactly what we feared," Lucas admitted. "He wants you back, claims legal right as your husband." "But our marriage is valid under territorial law," Lucas assured her. "Sheriff Taylor made that clear to him, but he's threatening legal action and he seems the type to follow through." Mrs. Harper snorted in disgust. "Men like that think money can buy anything or anyone." She patted Sophia's shoulder. "Don't you worry, dear. He'll find the West a different place than Boston. Out here, a woman has more say in her own destiny." Sheriff Taylor, who had followed Lucas in, nodded in agreement. "Mrs. Harper's right. Any legal challenge would take months to be heard, and the courts here are likely to favor your current marriage, especially given the circumstances." He looked at Sophia kindly. "I don't need details, Mrs. Garrison, but if there was mistreatment in your first marriage, the court would take that into consideration." Sophia looked between these people who had become her defenders, her community, in such a short time. Where once she would have cowered at the mere thought of Henry finding her, now she felt something else, not fearlessness exactly, but courage. The courage that comes from knowing you're not alone. "What should we do?" she asked Lucas. "Go home," he said simply. "Back to Meadowlark. I've arranged for Tommy and a couple of the hands to stay at the house for a few days, just as a precaution. Blackwell may try to approach you there. And if he does—" Sophia couldn't keep the tremor from her voice. Lucas's expression was resolute. "Then he'll find that Meadowlark is well defended, not just by me but by people who care about you." Sophia nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. "Then let's go home." The ride back to the ranch was tense, both of them watching the road behind them, half expecting to see Henry following. But they reached Meadowlark without incident, finding Mrs. Patterson already alerted to the situation by one of Sheriff Taylor's deputies who had ridden ahead. "That man won't set foot on this property if I have anything to say about it," the housekeeper declared fiercely. "I've prepared the guest room for Tommy and the bunkhouse for the other hands." That night, Sophia lay awake long after Lucas had fallen into uneasy sleep beside her. The enormity of Henry's appearance had finally hit her, and fear threatened to overwhelm her hard-won peace. What if he succeeded in his legal challenge? What if she was forced to return to Boston, to the life of quiet terror she had escaped? Lucas stirred beside her, reaching out in his sleep as if sensing her distress. His arm settled around her waist, warm and secure, and Sophia felt some of her panic recede. Whatever happened, she was no longer the helpless, isolated woman she had been in Boston. She had Lucas, Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Harper, Sheriff Taylor, an entire community of people who saw her value, who would stand with her. For the first time since spotting Henry in town, Sophia allowed herself to hope that perhaps this nightmare might still have a happy ending. The next morning brought no sign of Henry, but Lucas took no chances. He assigned Tommy to stay near the house while he went about his necessary ranch work, and Mrs. Patterson kept her shotgun prominently displayed in the kitchen. "I've never fired it," she admitted to Sophia as they prepared dinner, "but Blackwell doesn't know that, and I'm not too old to learn if necessary." The day passed tensely but without incident. By evening, Sophia had begun to wonder if perhaps Henry had decided to return east, to pursue his legal options from a distance rather than confront her directly. That hope was shattered just after sunset, when the sound of an approaching buggy reached them. Lucas, who had been reviewing accounts at the kitchen table, was on his feet instantly. "Stay inside," he instructed Sophia and Mrs. Patterson. "Tommy," he called to the young hand who was on the porch, "with me." They stepped outside just as the buggy pulled up in front of the house. Henry Blackwell sat in the driver's seat, alone, his expression a mask of cold determination. "Mr. Blackwell," Lucas acknowledged, positioning himself squarely in front of the porch steps. "You're trespassing on private property." Henry ignored him, his gaze fixed on the house behind. "I know she's in there," he called. "Sophia, come out and face me." Inside, Sophia's first instinct was to hide, to retreat to the bedroom and bolt the door. But something stronger than fear propelled her forward. She had spent too many years cowering from this man. No more. "Sophia, don't, Mrs. Patterson warned as she moved toward the door. "I have to," Sophia replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I can't hide forever. This is my home, and I won't let him make me a prisoner in it." Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the porch, though she remained safely behind Lucas. The sight of Henry after so many months was jarring. He looked exactly as she remembered, from his perfectly tailored suit to the cruel set of his mouth. "Hello, Henry," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Henry's eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance, the simple but well-made dress, the healthy color in her cheeks, the way she stood straight rather than hunched in fear. "You look different," he said, sounding almost confused. "I am different," Sophia agreed. "I'm not the woman you married anymore. I'm not your wife." Henry's expression hardened. "You'll always be my wife. Whatever charade you've enacted out here doesn't change that fact." He gestured dismissively at Lucas. "This rancher may have filled your head with nonsense about territorial law, but any proper court will recognize our marriage as binding." "You had me declared dead," Sophia pointed out. "There was a funeral, witnesses, documentation." "A fraud perpetrated by that meddling housekeeper," Henry snapped. "She'll be prosecuted when we return to Boston, I assure you." Sophia felt a flash of fear for Mrs. Quinn, quickly followed by anger. "You won't touch her," she said fiercely. "And I'm not returning to Boston. Not now, not ever." Henry's facade of reasonableness slipped further. "Don't be ridiculous, Sophia. This isn't a suitable life for you. Look at you, hands roughened by labor, skin darkened by the sun. You're living like a savage." "I'm living as I choose," Sophia corrected him. "For the first time in my life, I'm free to make my own decisions to build the life I want." She moved forward slightly, though still keeping Lucas between them. "And I've chosen this life, this place, this man." The look Henry gave Lucas was venomous. "You've turned her against me, filled her head with wild notions of independence. Sophia has always been impressionable, easily influenced." "The only person who tried to control her thinking was you," Lucas replied evenly. "I've simply given her the freedom to be herself." Henry's hand moved to his coat, and Lucas tensed, ready for a weapon. But instead, Henry withdrew a folded document. "I've consulted with a lawyer in Cheyenne," he said. "This is a writ demanding the return of my wife. It's signed by a territorial judge." He held it out and Lucas took it, scanning the contents quickly. His expression remained impassive, but Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders. "This isn't a valid court order," Lucas said finally. "It's a petition for a hearing, which I fully intend to contest." He handed the document back. "If you want to pursue this legally, you're welcome to try, but Sophia stays here until a court rules otherwise, if it ever does." Henry's face flushed with anger. "You're making a grave mistake, Garrison. I have powerful friends, even in this God-forsaken territory. I will have her back." "No, you won't," Sophia said, stepping forward to stand beside Lucas now. "Because I'll tell the truth, Henry, about all of it. About the beatings, the humiliation, the times you locked me in the cellar for days without food." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "I have the scars to prove it. Are you prepared for that truth to come out in open court? For your powerful friends to learn what kind of man you really are?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Henry's eyes. His reputation was everything to him, Sophia knew that. The thought of public exposure, of the whispers and sidelong glances that would follow such revelations, would be intolerable to his pride. "You wouldn't dare," he said, but the confidence had drained from his voice. "I would," Sophia assured him. "I was too afraid before, too isolated, but I'm not afraid anymore, Henry, and I'm certainly not alone." As if to punctuate her point, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Sheriff Taylor appeared around the bend in the road, accompanied by 2 deputies and, surprisingly, Mrs. Harper, riding astride like a man despite her age and formal dress. "Thought you might need some reinforcements," the sheriff called as they drew near. "Mrs. Harper here insisted on coming along." "That man's buggy was headed this way," Mrs. Harper explained as they reined in. "I know trouble when I see it." Henry looked from face to face, suddenly outnumbered and far from his sphere of influence. For the first time, he seemed to realize how completely the situation had shifted against him. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Yes, it is," Sophia replied firmly. "Go back to Boston, Henry, forget about me. File for divorce if you must, claim I abandoned you, whatever preserves your pride. But know this, if you pursue this, if you try to force me back, I will fight with everything I have. And I will win." The certainty in her voice, the steel beneath the softness, seemed to finally penetrate Henry's arrogance. He looked at her as if seeing a stranger, which in many ways she was. The meek, frightened woman he had married was gone, replaced by someone stronger, braver, and surrounded by allies. "You're not worth the trouble," he said finally, a last attempt to wound her. "Keep your squalid life in this wilderness. I'll find a more suitable wife in Boston." "For her sake, I hope you've changed," Sophia said quietly. "No woman deserves what you put me through." Henry had no response to that. With a final glare that encompassed all of them, he turned the buggy and drove away, dust billowing behind him. The tension didn't leave Sophia's body until the sound of the buggy had faded completely. Then, suddenly, her knees felt weak and she swayed slightly where she stood. Lucas was there instantly, his arm around her waist supporting her. "You were magnificent," he murmured into her hair. "I was terrified," she admitted, leaning into his strength. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Mrs. Harper said approvingly as she dismounted with surprising agility for her age. "It's action in spite of fear. And you, my dear, showed more courage than most men I've known." Sheriff Taylor approached, looking grim but satisfied. "I don't think he'll be back," he said. "Men like that are bullies at heart. When faced with real opposition, they usually back down." "What about his legal challenge?" Sophia asked, still worried. Taylor shook his head. "The document he showed you isn't worth the paper it's printed on. No territorial judge would have signed such a thing without a proper hearing with both parties present." He smiled slightly. "I suspect it was something he had drawn up himself or paid some clerk to create. A bluff." Sophia felt the last of her fear dissolve, replaced by a lightness she hadn't expected. "So it's over, truly over." "I believe it is," Lucas said, his arm still secure around her. "He knows now that you're not alone, not vulnerable. That pursuing you would mean exposing himself to scrutiny and scandal he can't afford." Mrs. Patterson, who had been watching from the porch, finally approached. "I've coffee brewing," she announced practically, "and fresh apple pie. I think we could all use something fortifying after such excitement." The spontaneous gathering that followed had the feeling of a celebration. Sheriff Taylor and his deputies, Mrs. Harper, Tommy and the other hands, Lucas and Sophia and Mrs. Patterson all crowded into the kitchen, drinking coffee, eating pie, and talking over the confrontation. The mood was triumphant but thoughtful, each of them aware of how differently things might have gone without their unity. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Sophia finally allowed herself to process the full range of emotions the day had brought. Lucas sat beside her on the bed, holding her hand as she alternated between tears and laughter, relief and lingering fear. "You think he's really gone for good?" she asked, voicing the worry that still nagged at her. Lucas considered the question seriously. "I do," he said finally. "Men like Blackwell only persist when they believe they can win. Today showed him that victory would cost more than he's willing to pay in money, time, and reputation." Sophia nodded, wanting to believe it. "I meant what I said to him. I'm not afraid anymore." She looked up at Lucas. "That's because of you, because you showed me what it means to be valued, to be respected, to be loved." Lucas raised her hand to his lips, kissing her palm gently. "You did the hard work yourself, Sophia. All I did was provide the space for you to become who you always were beneath the fear. Still," she insisted, "without you, without Meadowlark, I might never have found the courage to stand up to him." "Perhaps," Lucas acknowledged, But you did find it. That's what matters. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I'm proud of you, prouder than I can say. Sophia leaned into his touch, marveling at how different her life had become in just a few short months. From a terrified runaway to a woman who could face her abuser and send him running, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. What happens now? She asked. Lucas smiled. Now we live our life, the one we're building together, without looking over our shoulders, without fear shadowing our days. He drew her close. Now we focus on the future. The future. The word held such promise, such possibility. Sophia thought of the plans they had begun to make before Henry's arrival, expanding the ranch, perhaps starting a family, building a life deeply rooted in this land and community. I'd like that, she said softly. A future without fear. In the weeks that followed, they watched for any sign of Henry's return or legal action, but none came. Sheriff Taylor's contacts in Cheyenne reported that Blackwell had boarded a train east, apparently abandoning his pursuit. Gradually, the vigilance eased, and life at Meadowlark returned to its rhythm. The summer passed in a blur of work and happiness. Sophia learned to help with branding, became proficient enough on horseback to join Lucas on cattle drives to the high pastures, and put up hundreds of jars of preserved vegetables and fruits for the winter ahead. Her hands grew stronger, her skin weathered, and her heart fuller with each passing day. By the time autumn painted the aspens gold and the first frost silvered the meadows, Sophia had news that completed their joy. A baby. Lucas repeated, his face transforming with wonder when she told him one crisp October morning. You're certain? Mrs. Patterson confirmed it, Sophia said, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. She says I'm about 2 months along. The baby should arrive in late spring. Lucas gathered her into his arms, his joy so palpable it brought tears to her eyes. A child, he whispered against her hair. Our child. The wonder in his voice, the tenderness in his embrace, told Sophia everything she needed to know about the kind of father he would be: patient, loving, protective without being possessive. Are you happy? He asked, drawing back to search her face. More than I knew was possible, Sophia replied truthfully. As winter settled over Meadowlark, bringing snow that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland, Sophia felt a contentment so complete it sometimes took her breath away. Her body changed with the growing child within, and Lucas watched the transformation with awe, his hand often resting on the curve of her belly to feel the baby's movements. They spent the long evenings planning for the future, discussing names, making space in their bedroom for a cradle, dreaming about the person their child might become. Lucas read aloud from his collection of books, while Sophia worked on tiny garments, her needle flying through soft flannel and cotton. Spring arrived with its explosion of new life: calves in the pastures, wildflowers dotting the hillsides, and finally, on a perfect May morning with meadowlarks singing outside the window, their son was born. They named him James, after Lucas's father, with Thomas as his middle name in honor of Mrs. Harper's late husband, who had been Lucas's friend and mentor. Holding her son in her arms, with Lucas beside her, his face alight with love and pride, Sophia marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the terrified bride who had stepped off the train with fear in her eyes to the confident woman who had found not just safety, but joy, purpose, and love. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked softly, his arm around her shoulders as they gazed at their sleeping newborn. Sophia smiled, leaning into his strength. "I was thinking about what you said that first day, that fear has no place in our home." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You were right. There's no room for it here, not with so much love." Lucas pressed a kiss to her temple. No room at all, he agreed. Outside their window, Meadowlark Ranch spread in all directions, green and vibrant with spring. The land that had offered Sophia sanctuary had become truly her home, the place where she had found her courage, her voice, and the family she had always longed for. Fear had no place here, not anymore, not ever again.